Hello everyone! Throughout the semester we will be covering some common grammar errors that crop up in college students' writing. Many of these errors are connected to the sentence structure and punctuation of sentences, so we'll begin with identifying independent and dependent clauses. A clause is a group of words that contains both a noun and a verb. These can be independent clauses, which are clauses that can stand on their own as complete sentences, or dependent clauses, which are clauses that can't stand on their own and must be attached to an independent clause to be part of a complete sentence. An independent clause is a complete sentence containing a subject, that is the noun, pronoun, or noun phrase that's doing the action, and a predicate, the verb or verb phrase that describes that action. Here are two examples to explain subject and predicate. The first example is one of the simplest sentences that you can write. It's made up of a noun, which is the students, and a verb, read. That's it. The second example is a little more complex with added phrases to provide more detail. In this case, the noun, the students, is still the subject, but we now know which kinds of students they are. The verb, read, begins the predicate, which now includes information about books, which is the object of that reading. Let's do some practice. Pause the video here and identify the subject of each sentence and the verb that begins the predicate. Now that you've taken some time to review the sentences, here are the answers. Did any of these give you any trouble? Sometimes it can be easier if you simplify the sentences by cutting out the extra detail and focusing on what is doing the action and what is the action. For example, in I can remember picking up my father's books before I could read, you could simplify it to I can remember. The rest of the sentence is just explaining what you can remember. In most lived up to those expectations inside the classroom but subverted them on the outside, most is kind of standing in for most people, and there are actually two verbs, lived up to and subverted. This is called a compound predicate because you have multiple actions connected by a coordinating conjunction, but. Independent clauses can be connected or coordinated in a few different ways. The most common way is to coordinate two independent clauses using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. To remember the coordinating conjunctions, just think fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Another way is to use a semicolon between the two independent clauses. You should only really do this if the ideas in both of those sentences, those independent clauses, are closely related. If you're trying to be more concise in your writing, you can cut out repetition like the same subject or the same verb and combine the two clauses into one. If an independent clause has a transition word, such as however, then, or next, you need to set these off with punctuation. There are three ways to incorporate a transition word when working with two independent clauses. That is, transitions with periods, transitions with semicolons, and transitions mid-sentence. A dependent clause, also known as a subordinate clause, has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand on its own as a complete sentence. We usually call these fragment sentences. There are three types of dependent clauses that serve different functions. An adverb clause modifies, or that is, adds more information about a verb and begins with a subordinating conjunction. The list here contains a few examples, but you can find more complete list online. An adjective clause modifies, or that is, adds more information about a noun and begins with a relative pronoun. And finally, a noun clause stands in for a person, place, or thing, or idea, and can actually serve as the subject for an independent clause. Here are some examples of each type of clause. Notice how each one starts. Once you know what to look for, so subordinating conjunctions and relative pronouns, it becomes much easier to find adverb and adjective clauses. Noun clauses are easy to identify because they seem to trail off or be missing information. That's because they are. Because they act together as a noun, they're actually missing a predicate. Here are a few more examples. Pause the video and see if you can identify the type of dependent clause each one represents. And here are the answers. The use of that in the first and fifth are the clues that they are adjective clauses. When and since hint at the use of adverb clauses, and whoever and whether point to noun clauses. Dependent clauses cannot be left alone. They have to be connected to an independent clause. Adverb clauses can go before or after the independent clause without changing the meaning. This movability is an important characteristic of all adverbs. An adjective clause has to go right after the noun it is modifying, or it may get associated with the wrong noun and make the sentence confusing. A noun clause can go anywhere a noun can go in the sentence. So it should show up, or it could show up in the middle of an independent clause. Pause the video and look at these dependent clauses again. What independent clause could you connect them to make them a complete sentence? While there are many solutions, here are a few possibilities for fixing the dependent clauses. Now let's see if you can identify which of these samples are independent clauses and which ones are dependent clauses. Once you've identified the dependent clauses, what types of dependent clauses are they? Are they adverb, adjective, or noun clauses? How did you do? Notice that the third sample is an example of how a dependent and an independent clause should be combined to create a complete sentence and avoid a fragment. I would like to end by saying that I do not expect you to memorize these after one lesson in grammar practice. However, now that you are aware of these clauses, you should refer back to this video throughout the semester and seek to improve your use of these clauses in your writing. If you have any questions or would like to set up a Zoom conference, please contact me at mohondoylek@apsu.edu.